They thought she was invisible. They were wrong. She carried their coffee, cleaned their conference rooms, took their corrections without flinching, absorbed their condescension without a word, and showed up, every morning, in the same slightly worn blazer. They looked through her the way people look through glass. They called her the charity case, laughed about her in the break room, made her the punchline of jokes she was never supposed to hear, but always did. What they never asked, not once, was why she was really there. And that question, that one question they never thought to ask, was going to cost them everything. Because her name, her mother's name, was on the deed to the building they walked into every morning. Every floor. Every office. Hers. And she had been watching them, all of them, for 30 days straight. Taking notes. Lorraine Durant was 38 years old. She owned 4 work blouses, 2 pairs of dress trousers, and 1 blazer she had dry cleaned twice in the last year. Once for a job interview, and once for her mother's funeral. She grew up in Baltimore. East Side. The kind of block where ambition wasn't discouraged. It just had to survive everything else first. Her mother, Cecile, raised her alone. No apologies about it. No complaints either. Cecile Durant was the kind of woman who packed a hot lunch into a paper bag and still made it to work before her supervisor. Who read contracts carefully, every line, every footnote, because she had learned, the hard way, what happens when you don't. Lorraine watched her do that her whole childhood. Watched her underline things, circle things, fold corners of pages. She didn't fully understand why until much later. Lorraine put herself through community college working 3 jobs: a diner on Greenmount Avenue, a call center, and weekend shifts at a warehouse that smelled like rubber and recycled air. She graduated with honors that nobody threw a party for. She built a career, quietly, steadily, in financial analysis. Contract work mostly. Nothing glamorous. The kind of work where you're the most competent person in the room and the last one introduced. Then 6 months ago, Cecile Durant got sick. And then she was gone. She didn't leave Lorraine money. She left her a storage unit. Inside that storage unit, behind boxes of winter coats and old tax returns, was a locked metal file box. Inside that file box was a document dated January 1994. Lorraine read it once, sitting on the concrete floor of that storage unit, under a single fluorescent bulb. Then she read it again. Then she sat very still for a long time. Months later, after 4 months of mapping every document, every holding company, every thread of the ownership structure back to its origin, she applied for an internship at the Whitmore Group. Not because she needed the work. Not because she admired the company. She applied because she needed to see it with her own eyes. The thing her mother had built, the thing her mother had been erased from, the thing that had been carrying another family's name for 30 years while Cecile Durant clipped grocery coupons and made do. She got the position. She told no one why she wanted it. That same morning, across the city, Tiffany Whitmore stood in the kitchen of her 42nd floor penthouse and sent back her espresso because it wasn't hot enough. She had run the company for 11 years and genuinely believed that was the same thing as having built it. The housekeeper who had worked for her family for 11 years was let go before 8 a.m. No severance discussed. Tiffany had a 9 o'clock, and she didn't like starting her day with friction. 2 women. Same city. Same morning. One of them had inherited everything. One of them had inherited the truth. Lorraine arrived at the Whitmore Group at 7:58 a.m. 2 minutes early. She had ironed her blazer the night before. Pressed it twice. She wore her mother's watch on her left wrist, the clasp slightly loose, the way Cecile always wore it. She had her badge. Her paperwork. Everything they asked for, organized in a manila folder with color-coded tabs. She was ready. The HR coordinator's name was Derek. Derek looked up from his desk, looked Lorraine over, slowly, the way people do when they've already made a decision, and said, "You sure you're in the right building, sweetheart?" Lorraine smiled. Showed him her badge. Her confirmation email. Her offer letter. Derek told her to take a seat. She sat. 40 minutes passed. No one came. She didn't move. Didn't check her phone. Didn't ask again. She simply waited, the way her mother had taught her to wait, like someone who knows exactly how the story ends. Eventually, she was taken upstairs. The marketing floor was open plan. Glass walls. Standing desks. The kind of office that spent money on aesthetics and called it culture. The senior manager was a woman named Claudette. Claudette gathered the floor's attention with a single clap of her hands, practiced, satisfied, and announced, "Everyone, this is our diversity intern." She paused just long enough for the word to land. There was laughter. Not loud. Not cruel enough to be confronted. Just enough. Lorraine stood in the middle of it and nodded once. She noted who laughed. She noted who didn't. She noted everything. By 9:30 a.m. on her first day, Lorraine Durant, financial analyst, top of her community college class, the woman whose mother co-founded the company they were all standing in, was handed a mop. The cleaning crew had called out, she was told. "You don't mind, do you? Be a team player." She took the mop. She cleaned the floor outside the copy room. Then she kept mopping. But that wasn't even the worst part. At lunch, Lorraine sat alone at the far end of the break room table with a sandwich she'd packed from home. A junior executive named Preston walked past her with a full coffee cup. He caught her eye. He smiled. And then he tipped the cup, just enough, directly onto her notepad. Coffee spread across 2 hours of handwritten observations. Preston looked down at it. "Oops," he said. "Maybe keep your notes on something that matters next time." He walked away. Lorraine looked down at the soaked pages. Then she looked up. Her face was completely still. She tore out the damaged pages, folded them carefully, and placed them in her bag. Then she took out a fresh notepad, she had brought two, and started writing again. But Lorraine Durant was not most people. And what she did next took a kind of strength that is very rare. And very dangerous. To the right people. He appeared on the marketing floor on a Wednesday. No announcement. No assistant preceding him with a schedule. He simply walked in, quietly, unhurried, the way people move when they have never needed to announce themselves. His name was Augustine Reeves. He was dressed plainly. Dark suit, no tie, no pocket square. Nothing that called attention. And yet every person on that floor felt him the moment he entered. Conversations dropped in volume. Postures changed. Claudette, who had spent the entire morning speaking at full projection, suddenly found something urgent to do at her desk. Derek, who had made Lorraine wait 40 minutes that morning without a second thought, straightened his collar and looked at the floor. Augustine Reeves had no visible title. His office, on the executive level, corner position, the one with the unobstructed view of the city, had no nameplate on the door. Just a room number. Assistants did not walk beside him. They walked slightly behind him, at a careful distance, the way people position themselves around someone whose mood they are always trying to read. Nobody on that floor could have told you exactly what Augustine Reeves did at the Whitmore Group. But nobody questioned his presence either. He stopped outside the glass wall of the conference room. Lorraine was inside, alone, reorganizing her notes on a fresh legal pad. The coffee-stained pages long discarded, the morning already processed and filed. He didn't knock. Didn't enter. He simply stood there and watched her. Not the way Derek had watched her, sizing her up, looking for a reason to dismiss her. Not the way Preston had looked at her, with that particular contempt people perform for an audience. Augustine Reeves watched Lorraine Durant the way you watch something you have been waiting for. With recognition. With something that looked, from a distance, almost like relief. She felt his eyes. She looked up. Their gaze held for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked back toward the elevator. He said nothing. She said nothing. No one introduced him to Lorraine. No one needed to. Because she had seen his face before. In a photograph. Old photograph. Edges soft with age. 2 people standing outside a building that no longer looked the way it does today. Before the renovation, before the rebranding, before the name above the door was changed. 2 people who looked like they had just built something together. One of them was Augustine Reeves. The other one was her mother. What was the connection between Cecile Durant and the most powerful man in that building? How deep did it go? And why, after 30 years of silence, was he looking at Lorraine like he had been counting the days? We'll get there. But first, the people who thought they owned that building were about to make their worst mistake yet. And Lorraine was going to let them. On her 5th night at the Whitmore Group, Lorraine stayed late. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because she was trying to impress anyone. She stayed because she had read 3 years of the company's quarterly reports, the ones she'd found in an unlocked shared drive, and she had spotted something. A pattern in the market data that the entire marketing division had been reading backwards. She wrote it up. 12 pages. Clean. Precise. Sourced. The kind of analysis that takes most people a week to produce. She had not written it as bait. She had written it because it was true, and because she was incapable of being in a room with a fixable problem and not fixing it. That, too, was her mother's. She left it in Claudette's inbox at 9:47 p.m. with a single line of explanation. No request for recognition. No follow-up email. She went home, made tea, and went to bed. 3 days later, Claudette walked into the quarterly board presentation with Lorraine's report in a leather folder with Claudette's own name printed on the cover. She presented it slide by slide. Used Lorraine's exact phrasing in 3 separate sections. Adopted Lorraine's conclusions as her own recommendations. The board responded with sustained applause. The CFO called it the sharpest market read the division had produced in 2 years. The chairwoman gave Claudette a personal commendation. Lorraine watched all of it through the glass panel of the boardroom door. She stood there for the entire presentation. No one inside that room looked up. Afterward, in the corridor, Lorraine approached Claudette. Quietly. Professionally. No audience. She asked, simply directly, whether there was any plan to acknowledge the source of the analysis. Claudette looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Credit? Honey, interns don't get credit. They get experience." A pause. "Be grateful." And she walked away. 2 weeks later, the Whitmore Group announced its annual corporate gala. Black tie. Catered. The kind of event the company used to remind itself how well it was doing. Interns were told they were welcome to attend. What they were not told, until the morning of, was the capacity in which they were welcome. Lorraine arrived to find a catering apron waiting for her on a chair with her name written on a post-it note. She put it on. She carried trays. She refilled glasses for people who looked through her. The following Monday, Derek called her into his office and shut the door. He told her there had been a complaint, that she had been acting above her station, that submitting unsolicited strategic documents was considered a breach of intern conduct protocol, a phrase he used with the confidence of someone who had just invented it. He told her that one more incident of this nature would result in the termination of her placement. He slid a written warning across the desk. He asked her to sign it. She looked at the warning. She looked at Derek. She picked up the pen. And she signed it, because she needed 3 more weeks. Just 3 more weeks inside that building. And she was not going to let Derek or Claudette or Preston or any of them take that from her. She sat in that chair, in that blazer she had pressed the night before, and felt something her mother had warned her about years ago. Not anger. Something quieter than anger. The specific exhaustion of being underestimated by people who have never built a single thing. Cecile Durant had felt it too, for 30 years, and it had never broken her. It was not going to break her daughter. Lorraine walked out of Derek's office, down the corridor, past the marketing floor, past the boardroom where her work had been applauded under another woman's name, and into the stairwell. She sat on the second step. She opened her phone. She sent one text message. 3 words. "I'm ready now." The parking garage was empty by 8:15. The last of the marketing floor had filtered out, laughing, making dinner plans unbothered. Lorraine sat in her car on level 2 and did not move for a long time. She didn't cry. She had learned a long time ago, watching her mother, that tears have their place, and their place is not in front of people who would use them against you. She opened her laptop. The screen lit up the interior of the car in pale blue. She opened a folder she had named, simply 1994. Inside it, legal documents, partnership agreements, trust registration filings, a corporate ownership structure that had been deliberately fragmented across 7 separate holding companies, each one registered in a different state, each one designed to make the whole impossible to trace at a glance. But Lorraine had not looked at it at a glance. She had spent 4 months before she ever set foot in that building, mapping every thread. And every thread, without exception, led back to the same 2 names. One of them was Whitmore. The other one was Durant. Her mother's name, Cecile Durant, threaded through the foundation of that company like a load-bearing wall that had been plastered over and forgotten. The restructuring had never been legal. Any change to the original ownership structure required the written consent of all founding partners. Cecile Durant had never given hers. Every document filed after 1994 was built on a foundation that had always been void. A knock at the window. Soft. 2 knuckles. Unhurried. She looked up. Augustine Reeves stood beside the car in the half-dark of the parking garage, hands at his sides, waiting. She rolled the window down. He didn't lean in, didn't crowd the space. Just stood there, with the expression of someone who had been carrying a promise for a very long time. He said, "I knew your mother." A pause. "She made me promise to wait until you were ready." Lorraine looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "I've been ready." Another pause. "I just needed to see what they really were." Augustine nodded once. Like that was exactly the answer Cecile had told him to expect. He had been the executor of her estate for 3 years, appointed quietly before she got sick because Cecile Durant had always known how the story would need to end. What Lorraine had found in that storage unit, what Cecile Durant had kept locked in that metal file box behind the winter coats, was the original sin of the Whitmore Group. Decades earlier, the Whitmore family had an idea and no money to build it with. Cecile Durant had the money. Not a fortune, but enough. Every dollar she had saved over a decade of careful, disciplined work, offered as seed capital to a partnership she believed in with people she trusted. She signed over her voting shares on the promise of a formal equity agreement to follow. That agreement never came. What came instead was a revised company structure, filed quietly 6 months later, in which Cecile Durant's name appeared nowhere. Not in the founding documents. Not in the company history. Not on the wall in the lobby where the Whitmore Group displayed its legacy timeline in brushed gold lettering. She had been removed. Completely. Deliberately. While Cecile was recovering from surgery and unreachable for 3 weeks. By the time she understood what had happened, she had no money left to fight it. So she kept the documents. She kept every original, every draft, every signed copy. She kept them in a locked metal box in a storage unit on the east side of Baltimore for 30 years. And then she gave them to her daughter. Lorraine Durant did not come to the Whitmore Group for revenge. Revenge is loud. Revenge is rushed. Revenge makes mistakes. She came to finish what her mother started. And now she was ready. Monday morning, 8:55 a.m. The Whitmore Group boardroom was set for a routine quarterly shareholder meeting. Water glasses filled. Agendas printed. The kind of meeting that runs 90 minutes and changes nothing. Tiffany Whitmore sat at the head of the table in a cream blazer that cost more than Lorraine's monthly rent. Claudette to her left, already reviewing her notes built, in no small part, on work she had taken from someone she considered beneath her. Derek sat 3 chairs down, scrolling his phone. Preston beside him, coffee in hand, leaning back in his chair with the ease of a man who has never once felt unwelcome in a room. The room was full. The doors were closed. Everything was exactly as it always was. At 8:57 the doors opened. No one knocked. Lorraine Durant walked in first. Same woman, different everything else. No slightly worn blazer pressed the night before in a small apartment. She wore black. Clean lines. Her mother's watch on her left wrist. Augustine Reeves walked in beside her. Behind them, for attorneys in 2 rows, each carrying a structured document case. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something has already changed and the people inside haven't caught up yet. Tiffany Whitmore looked up, looked at Lorraine, looked at Augustine, and then her voice cut across the table like she was correcting a clerical error. "What is SHE doing in here?" Nobody answered her. Augustine Reeves walked to the center of the table. He set down a single document. Original, not a copy, the edges soft with age, the signatures on the final page in ink that had faded to brown. He didn't raise his voice. He said, "Under the original 1994 partnership agreement, affirmed by court order last Friday, never dissolved, never legally voided, controlling interest in the Whitmore Group was held by Cecile Durant. Upon her death, that interest transferred in full to her daughter." He stepped back. The room was completely silent. The kind of silence that has weight. Tiffany Whitmore laughed. It was a short laugh. Sharp. The kind that is meant to reduce something before it can grow. "That's absurd," she said. "She's an intern." Lorraine pulled out the chair at the head of the table. Tiffany's chair. She sat down in it. She folded her hands on the table in front of her, and she looked at Tiffany Whitmore with an expression that was not triumphant, not cruel, not rushed. Just settled. The expression of someone who has been waiting a very long time and has finally stopped waiting. She said, "I was an intern. Effective as of this morning, I'm your employer." The attorneys moved. Quietly, efficiently, without drama. The way people move when the outcome has already been determined and the current moment is merely the formality. They placed individual folders on the table. One in front of Claudette. One in front of Derek. One in front of Preston. Each folder had a name on the cover. Each folder had a tab. Each tab had a date. Preston opened his first. Inside, a printed screenshot of the group chat message. His name at the top. The photograph of Lorraine holding the catering tray. The caption. The timestamp. The list of 26 people who had reacted to it. Signed witness statements from 2 members of the catering staff who had been standing nearby. He closed the folder. He did not speak. Derek opened his next. Inside, a full transcript of the Monday morning meeting in his office. The written warning he had asked her to sign. A legal assessment, 3 pages, detailing the specific employment statutes that warning had violated. A note at the bottom that his HR certification had been flagged for review. He set it down very carefully on the table. He also did not speak. Claudette was last. She opened her folder slowly. The first page was a copy of the market analysis report, the one she had presented to the board, the one that had earned her a personal commendation from the chairwoman. The second page was a metadata report generated by the document software. Author, L. Durant. Created, 11:47 p.m., a Tuesday. Last modified by C. Beaumont, Claudette's full name, the following morning at 7:52 a.m. 40 minutes before the board presentation. The commendation letter was paper-clipped to the back. Claudette's name on the front. Lorraine's fingerprints, digitally irrefutably, on every word inside. Claudette looked up from the folder. Her face had gone the specific pale of someone who has just understood that every exit has been accounted for. Lorraine looked at her and said, "I gave you a chance to be decent. You chose differently. 30 years of a woman saving documents in a locked metal box. And in 4 minutes on a Monday morning, every single one of those years came due. Justice, when it is real, is not loud. It arrives the way Lorraine Durant arrived that Monday morning, quietly, prepared, and already decided." Claudette Beaumont was escorted from the building at 10:43 a.m. The termination letter cited plagiarism, fraudulent misrepresentation to the board, a documented pattern of hostile conduct toward a subordinate. She was given 30 minutes to collect her belongings. She used 22 of them. The commendation letter from the chairwoman, the one framed on her office wall, the one built entirely on 12 pages of someone else's analysis, was left behind on the desk. No one picked it up. Derek's case was referred to an independent HR investigation committee, one appointed by the new controlling interest, not the old one. The written warning he had asked Lorraine to sign was entered into evidence. He handed in his access badge without making eye contact with anyone. Preston was let go the same afternoon. The group chat screenshot, his name, his caption, his laughing emoji, timestamped and witnessed, was entered as Exhibit A in a formal workplace harassment filing. There was no negotiation. There was no performance review. There was simply a letter, a signature line, and a box for his personal items waiting outside his office door when he returned from lunch. He had enough self-awareness to leave without a word. Tiffany Whitmore was handled differently. Not out of mercy, out of precision. Lorraine's legal team presented her with 2 options. The first, a reduced, non-voting advisory position, a title without authority, a seat without power, a name on a door that opened nothing. The second, a full buyout, calculated at fair market value against the original 1994 agreement, which meant the Whitmore family's decades of compounded gain from Cecile Durant's seed capital was factored into every single digit of that number. She was given 48 hours to decide. She did not use all of them. At 11:15 that morning, Tiffany Whitmore walked out of the boardroom, down the corridor, into the elevator, across the lobby, the same lobby where, 30 days earlier, a woman in a slightly worn blazer had walked in carrying a notepad and been looked through like glass. The same lobby where that same woman had been handed a mop and told to be a team player. As Tiffany crossed the marble floor toward the exit, she passed 2 maintenance workers on a ladder near the executive corridor. Lorraine had arranged it the night before. They were installing something on the wall outside the CEO's office. A nameplate. New. Clean. Brushed metal. It read, Lorraine Durant Reeves. Chief Executive Officer. Durant for her mother. Reeves for the man who had kept the promise. Tiffany Whitmore did not stop walking. But she saw it. Not one person in that building said congratulations to Lorraine that day. Not one colleague stopped by her new office. Not one person from the marketing floor sent a message. The silence from people who had laughed in group chats and looked through her in hallways was total and unsurprising. Lorraine had not expected anything different. She had not come here for their approval. She had never needed it. But late that afternoon, when the building had mostly emptied and Lorraine sat alone at the desk that was now legally, irrevocably hers, she reached up and unclasped her mother's watch. Set it on the desk. Then she found something on the door. A sticky note. Yellow. Small. The handwriting slightly uneven, like someone who had written it quickly before losing their nerve. She recognized it immediately. The security guard at the front desk. The one who had nodded at her every single morning, without fail, without condition, while everyone else looked past her. The note said 2 words. I knew. She pressed the note carefully between her fingers. Then she walked to her desk, opened the top drawer and placed it inside, next to her mother's watch already waiting there, and set it down gently, like something that had finally been carried far enough. On a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after she sat down at the head of that table, Lorraine Durant left the office at 2 p.m. Her assistant asked if everything was all right. Lorraine said yes. She said she had somewhere to be. The cemetery was 40 minutes from the building. She drove with the radio off, parked at the gate, walked the familiar path between the rows, the one she had walked 6 months ago in borrowed heels on the worst morning of her life, and stopped at the headstone she knew by its angle, by the small chip in the lower left corner, by the way the light hit it in the afternoon. Cecile Marion Durant, 1955 to 2024. She kept her word. That last line had been Lorraine's choice. For words that meant everything and explained nothing to anyone who hadn't been paying attention. She crouched down, reached into her jacket pocket, and placed a single business card against the base of the headstone, leaning it carefully so it wouldn't fall. It read, Lorraine Durant Reeves, Chief Executive Officer. Durant and Partners. Because that was the other thing. In the months that followed, Lorraine's legal and communications teams had filed the paperwork. The Whitmore Group, every floor, every client account, every brushed gold letter in the lobby timeline, was officially rebranded. The new name was announced in a press release that ran 14 paragraphs. Paragraph 3 named Cecile Durant as a founding partner of the original company. It described her contribution in full. The seed capital. The year. The nature of the agreement. It did not soften the history. It did not use careful language designed to protect the people who had erased her. It simply told the truth. The plain, documented, overdue truth. And put it on the record where it could never be quietly removed again. For the first time in years, Cecile Durant's name was attached to the thing she had helped build. In print. Publicly. Permanently. That evening after the cemetery, Lorraine returned to the building. The floor was empty. The lights on the executive level had dimmed to their after-hours setting. She went to the boardroom. Sat down, not at the head of the table this time, but in a chair near the window, the city laid out behind the glass in the early dark. She opened her bag and took out a document she had read many times now, but never tired of. The original 1994 partnership letter. Her mother's handwriting in the margin, precise, unhurried annotations in blue ink. Questions Cecile had asked before signing. Conditions she had negotiated. The careful, thorough work of a woman who trusted but verified. Who had been betrayed anyway. Who had kept the proof anyway. Who had raised a daughter in the specific knowledge that truth, properly preserved, outlasts almost everything that tries to bury it. Lorraine read it from the first line to the last. Then she folded it carefully along its original creases and placed it back in the envelope. She came with grace. She came with evidence. She came with 30 years of receipts in a locked metal box. And she left with her mother's name restored, above the door, in the press release, on the record, in the history of the company exactly where it always belonged. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been handed a mop when you deserved a seat at the table, if you have ever watched someone take credit for what you built in the dark, this one was for you. and for every Cecile Durant who kept the documents, held on to the truth, and trusted that someday, the right person would know exactly what to do with it.